go now. So good morning again. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I am Matthew Webster, Vice President of Geospatial Technologies here at Spatial Innovation Limited, as well as Sector Lead for Emergency Management and Public Safety. Today, we'll explore how ArcGIS supports emergency operations across your life cycle. I'm talking from preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. Response and recovery. As you know, within our Caribbean, disasters are a part of our reality. However, as we'd say, ineffective response does not need to be. And we want to see how we can move from being reactive to a more proactive, data-driven decision-making kind of cycle. So when we look at the Caribbean, we see a long history of impactful disasters, from the great hurricanes in the 1780s to more recently Hurricane Irma, and Hurricane Maria, which would have affected the Caribbean within 2017, and even more recently Hurricane Beryl and Hurricane Melissa, which would have happened last year. However, what's changing is not just how often they happen, but also due to the seawater being hot and the conditions for a perfect storm, they're becoming much more intense, much more complex, and the costs associated with rebuilding they continue to increase. And this creates very, very real challenges for sure. We're talking about increase in your operational demands as you go out and do your recovery. You're talking about a greater strain on the limited resources that already exist, particularly if you're looking in your preparedness and mitigation phases. The response can become heavy, very burdensome on your limited resources. And we do anticipate that there are more disasters coming. So the real question becomes, how do we respond better to these challenges that we are facing at this time in the Caribbean? So when disaster strikes, what typically goes wrong, you would say? We often kind of see the same issues, data in silos. So multiple agencies having, well, you can start within agencies where one department is collecting one set of data, but a department that is right beside it is not seeing that data, and data not being shared in that way, which creates challenges. And often when we have these natural disasters, they're not impacting just us, they're impacting the wider country itself. So within organizations, you're seeing challenges with data sharing, and then as well with other partner agencies, the ministries that we work with, for instance, within the government, the Ministry of Agriculture may be collecting some useful data that could be used with the Ministry of, let's say, that manages emergency management. So in that sense, how do we, when the disaster strikes, that is a big, big challenge for us. What does that cause? What we call a delayed situational awareness, delays in understanding what is really happening on the ground. So speaking from our experience here in Jamaica with the most Hurricane Melissa, when it hit on the Tuesday, power lines are down, utilities are down. How do you, as first responders in our own right, how do we ensure that our situational awareness is more real time and allows for that? And those delays create issues because in some cases you may have remote areas that you don't know what's happening in those areas, and there are challenges, and we've seen lives lost because of situations like that. Now, additionally, what you see is that when a disaster strikes, you have issues where One organization is using one system, another organization may be using another system, and then you talk about how do we integrate all this data. So we're all going out collecting data as things happen, as you prepare, as you got to mitigate, as you respond. But if we're moving in all different platforms, how do we share that data and how do we integrate those systems? So that's one of the issues that we also see when disaster strikes from our experience as well. So what happens as well is you a lot of them is made in the form of spreadsheets, in the form of shape files, but the systems that you're using, you're not able to see the data. It's hard to visualize those difficulties as you visualize that data. Particularly, especially if the data is not clean data, if it's not good data, you have issues visualizing those things. And there are tools that are built in ArcGIS to help with that. One very popular one is the dashboard, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And lastly, what we have as information overload. So disaster happens. You're trying to make sure that the public is informed, but behind the closed doors, everybody kind of running around in the emergency operations center, looking at different things. People are looking at, where is damaged. People are looking at the vulnerable areas, and how you deploy your different agencies, whether you're using your army to help go out and move debris, or you're connecting with your Ministry of Health in terms of how they're admitting patients. You're getting information from all different sources, and that creates an overload. So then how do you siphon all of that data and put it in a format that you're able to inform your stakeholders, whether it may be the public, whether it may be internally, whether it's up to your stakeholders going up to your respective prime ministers, in terms of how they do briefings, or different ministers as they do briefings to the country. How does the information kind of roll up into the bigger picture, so to speak? So with that information overload, one of the things you want to do is to simplify the processes as to how we get information in and how we also interpret that information at the end. And that's one of the shifts that ArcGIS does enable, allowing you to put all that information in one place. And depending on how you want to configure the system, you can also do that in real time. So imagine having all of that in one place, pretty much in real time, collecting all that data from all those agencies and putting it into one mixing pot and creating what we call your common operating picture. So with any operation, it's important that we establish what we call our common operating picture, and ArcGIS can be that common operating picture. You can utilize ArcGIS to manage, analyze, apply your geographic information because you have the location information with your data, but it gives you the viewpoint of solving those problems holistically. And with the system, it does integrate with most of the systems that are there and allows you to leverage the location information within ArcGIS with the technologies that you use, whichever systems you're using to ingest your data. If you're doing live camera feeds, if you're doing, pulling data from your legacy systems, ArcGIS does afford for that. It does allow you to easily create the maps, so that, whether it's to the public or whether it's internally, easily create those maps and visualize the data as mentioned. But with that common operating picture, we're able to manage the data, share with the people, and then also make authoritative decisions. And if you want to go to modeling future disasters, that is also possible. Whether you're doing that in your preparedness stage or in your mitigation stage, utilizing the modeling aspects of the system to inform you how to do that. And it creates this central platform for decision making. Whether you want to identify your problems earlier, monitor change. So you can use tools like the swipe tool, like you can see the before and after of vegetation, for instance, if you're monitoring an area. Being able to manage and respond to events quickly, perform forecasting, set your own priorities, and essentially transforming your data into what we call actionable. intelligence. So within that common operating picture, what it creates is what we call that common ground for decision making. And it builds its way up, starting from the base maps level, your very fundamental, the fundamental data. So you have the ability to integrate all types of data. And as we build up on the base maps, then you can say, whether it's a street network, a topography, if you're having aerial photos, that very base map will build on top of that. So when you ask a question or start to solve a problem, the first thing we need to do is look for the information that we need to help us understand better. It starts with that foundational data within the base maps, whether, as I mentioned, it's your traditional street network or your topography, and it can also include the imagery or satellite views to help give you some context. And for context, satellite imagery became very useful, and satellite and imagery, I should say, drone imagery as well, became very useful when we were responding to when we were doing our immediate response to Hurricane Melissa. And then after disaster strikes, we rely on that imagery and Earth observation so that we can get that big snapshot of what really happened and better understand the impact. Now, following the base maps and those imagery is now your base data, which, as mentioned, your different agencies would be collecting. So whether you're collecting your school, your location of your schools, the location of your nursing homes, your hospitals, your critical infrastructure. One agency may not be collecting all this data, but when we create this common operating picture, everybody has the ability to share this data in this portal. That allows everybody to see, and work with that fundamental data. So those things that you care about in your jurisdiction. For instance, I'm working with a team in Barbados now, and they're looking at vulnerable populations. How can they serve them better? And as the disaster season has now started, how can they move them from those vulnerable stages now before anything is to strike? And that's a project that's happening currently. So with that, you can input all of those data points from the different data sources that your respective agencies and putting them into that, creating that big common operating picture. So after including your base data now on top of your base maps, you want to look at what we call your operational layers. Now, these are incidents that are happening. These are shelters that are on the ground. You're talking about, if roads are closed, this is information that is being collected somewhere. But if we put this all together, it can make it, work much better for everyone. So adding those operational layers are the data layers that we need now from within our agencies to create a much more common ground for decision makers so that you're factoring everything into the decisions that you make. You can manage those operational layers within your agencies, as mentioned, but also know that there are partner agencies who may have operational layers that could assist based on experience in the past. So it's very good to be a part of the community. So you create these operational layers now on top of that base data. So you have what you're using, and these layers are for when you're doing particularly your analysis. Once you start to put these little incidents on the map, now you can start to say, okay, the geographic component comes in terms of if something is happening in a particular area, is it a trend in that area? Is nothing happening in a space? Are shelters overpopulated? Based on the numbers that you're getting directly from those location points, you're able to know better reallocate or better allocate your resources to respond better to anything that is crisis. And by adding now live feeds to that adds another dimension. And there are a lot of live feeds that are included within the Living Atlas, which if you're a licensed user, you have access to, which includes weather warnings and watches, storm reports, hurricane tracking information. And I'm going to share a dashboard in the next slide to show a case of that. But there are live feeds that are happening from all over the world that you can include into your maps to better inform that. And you can also put in live streaming footage. So what we saw as a part of our hurricane response, we were able to pull the live camera streams on YouTube from different areas in Jamaica as part of monitoring within this common operating feature. And it's, becomes very useful. And additionally, the National Hurricane Center does provide data very often within the living atlas that you can include in the work that you do. But at the core of all of this, everything that I've shared here, at the core of all of this is really what we call integration, which is why I mentioned particularly around the base data, which is the most important component, I would say, is that the information that is being collected for your schools and your different critical infrastructure, your demographic data, which would probably be collected by a statistics department. How can we put everything into one map, and then using that data, you're able to create this single source of truth, as well as what is very important, that real-time situational awareness, whether it's getting live feeds from your sensors that you have installed already, or sending out alerts from the system. I know in one case we were working on a pilot that would send an alert out to the community if there was a flood. If there was a flood, that was a flood warning, I would say, as well as the live weather feed that you can track what's happening, and how you include your infrastructure and your communities, which is your base data. You can see how everything interacts with each other, creating that single source of truth. And once you have all of this in place, I would say that you'd have established a good framework based around location that can transform your data into what we call actionable information. And what we'd say is from that changes how decisions are made during a crisis. And to be honest, I'd really be interested to learn more from the different organizations which are joining the webinar in terms of how are you your data, the systems that you're using at the agency, and how if there's any possible integrations, or what are the challenges that you're facing, and then challenge us to present a solution to you that could help to solve that problem, I would say. So, as mentioned, these are a few dashboard examples, and I want to just highlight two things. The one in the top left, that was the actual Hurricane Melissa emergency shelter dashboard that would have been activated maybe a few days before we were struck. And they utilized this to track, how many shelters were on stream, the population of the shelters, how many men or women were in there, if they were active or inactive, to be able to manage how the shelters are, being done. And in the top right hand corner, where you see that hurricane inserts up, that was actually a live weather map that was tracking the movement of the hurricane as it was coming, providing that bit of location component, so we could know where things were at all time, and providing that real-time update. But what we find is that dashboards are often what decision makers interact with most often. And the other three that I pulled up here are actually available to our users already. So further on in the session, I'll show a little bit about ArcGIS solutions. What I find when I speak to agencies within the region, we get so used to the existing workflows that we're doing, and not know the capabilities that already exist to me. And I'll show you how you can log into ArcGIS solutions and actually have ready-made templates, ready-made solutions that pretty much is waiting on your data to go in and provide this bit of information that you're seeing on the screen. And you can literally deploy them from ArcGIS solutions, which based on your license configuration, mostly you should have access to. And if you are interested to learn more about ArcGIS solutions, which I'll share a little bit more later, you can always also feel free to reach out to me, and I'll share my contact information there. So before I go any further, I'm gonna pause here before I go into the support of the emergency management life cycle, just to see if there are any questions. If everything is clear so far, could I get an indication in the chat before I move further? And as mentioned, I'm also interested to know, what are some of the challenges that your organization may be facing. Feel free to, if you want to share them here, you can keep it very general, or feel free to send it, to me. But I'm curious to know, what are some of the challenges that you're facing within the emergency management, especially that we're now in the season. So, all right, so I got one message. Thank you, appreciate that. So, moving forward, I understand that everything is all good so far. So, ArcGIS does provide the capabilities to support the entire emergency management life cycle. So, no matter what are the mission needs that you're doing, you have access to different areas of the life cycle. And I am I'm going to show you some of that a little bit later. So I'm very happy to share some. But some of those technical challenges that you face as well, the system is built for that. So for years in working within this sector, we've seen how members of our user community have been able to evolve and leverage ArcGIS in support across all phases across the cycle. Right. So some of the biggest workflows that we see include preparedness, as mentioned, mitigation, how you respond to the disaster, and what does recovery look like. And right now we're in the recovery phase of the Hurricane Melissa. So some of the maps that are being created are what is some of the rebuilding work what is the status of the rebuilding work that is being done. So those like dashboards like that I've seen going out as well this time. So what makes ArcGIS powerful is that it supports all these phases and supports different workflows in each of these phases. So one more thing is that what you find is as a part of maybe your mitigation strategy, it may be very different for everyone. And what we call those are more like an evolving mission area. So what is your approach to resilience? What is your approach to climate adaptation? And different organizations may have different mandates. Some are looking more at the vulnerable community and want to address maybe homelessness, for instance. How do they get people off the streets? Because if a disaster comes in, you have less people. So some people have some agencies have different mandates. And with that, depending on whatever mission area your organization may be doing, again, let's talk about it so that, let us, again, challenge us to present a solution to you. So in supporting all of these areas, as I said, preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. In supporting all these phases, you're talking about digitally operationalizing your hazard mitigation plans. Whether it's conducting risk assessments, how are you tracking your mitigation projects? Because most of these are what we call missions to, help us to reduce the impact of the disaster, because as we mentioned in the beginning, disasters will happen, but it's how you respond to it and how we prepare for it. How do you understand how exposed their critical infrastructure is? In moving to response, we're talking about that real-time situational awareness. How are we collaborating and sharing information? So we saw where different agencies within the government of Jamaica response, how they were able to talk and share that information, whether it's the utilities companies that's sharing information about their poles to the national works, the road agency, as we call them, the road agency, in terms of road closures, what paths are they supposed to take. It was also including our defense force. They were helping to clear some of those paths and label incidents that are happening in real time so that people know that as they make their way, these areas are safe to travel, these areas are not safe to travel. And also there was information going out to the public in that regard as well, for those that were able to travel, because it was encouraged that we go out and support from the eastern side of the island, the more damaged western side of the island. So how the public must go. And one of the initiatives included, removing the toll on our toll routes so that you could travel freely across the country to be able to deliver care packages and stuff. You're talking about recovery, you're talking about damage assessment. How do you use imagery to look at what has happened on the ground, and to be able to create what we call a rapid damage assessment that you can share with the public. So within a week or 2 weeks, some of your stakeholders, people are going to be having questions of the agencies, or having questions of the wider government itself. What is happening? What has been damaged? How are you able to quickly get that information using the tools that you already have in most cases? How are you able to share that information now with the public? When you talk about debris, as you can imagine, hurricanes leave a lot of debris. How can the public inform us, hey, there's a sign that fell down on the street, and it would be good if you could take it up. How do you get that into your system so that where you may not have a field worker in a particular area, you're getting information from the public? And we found that very useful in the work that we are doing. Restoration status, pretty much. And then in the preparedness, as we mentioned, looking at what has happened in the past and how we move forward to the future. So very quickly, I'm just going to go through the four areas, starting with preparedness. There are many ways that ArcGIS can help you in preparedness, whether it is to conduct your impact analysis, understanding the impact of disasters, to your modeling, in terms of mapping hypothetical scenarios that you can walk through. If this event were to happen, what would we do? And essentially, create more data-driven plans based on the information that you'd have received from cross agencies, and creating a more interactive features to the dashboards where you can now interrogate data. So it's not like a spreadsheet or report, which is like a spreadsheet, and the data that's in front of you, that's it. Something a bit more dynamic where you can actually click into the locations and get more information about particular areas. Very important in that experience as well, because that user experience is very important. Oops. All right, cool. From the mitigation side of things, it allows you to assess, vulnerabilities, prioritize your investments against your mitigation efforts, and also to track those projects. Because particularly you're going out on a project to say, all right, I don't want to react to that disaster. I want to reduce the impact when the disaster happens. How do you measure that? How do you track that? The ArcGIS system does allow you to do that and create an inventory about these projects. And what we know as an organization is that hazard mitigation requires tools that allow you to assess more like systemic risk, vulnerability within a community, so that you can vulnerability within the community, so that you can design more effective policies and risk reduction strategies for the community. And it does allow for that, whether it is digitally operationalizing your plans, so whether it's 3D assessments, 3D data modeling, building a digital twin of your country, which I think there's one for Grenada, for instance, where they're able to actually use that digital twin and actually see what's happening from their system. Prioritizing the mitigation efforts. So being able to respond, being able to put the right resources in the right areas, because you want to be able to respond to everybody, but you don't want to overestimate an area and you don't want to underestimate an area. By being able to conduct those risk assessments, you're able to understand your vulnerabilities, and then know if something were to happen, how do you deploy your resources? And again, being able to track these projects so that you can, for future projects, understand, how this project worked, what can we learn from this, and how we move forward. Now, in response, situational awareness and information sharing are the major areas of this. You want to be able to maintain that situational awareness because it is critical for an effective response. Now, the system provides an integrated real-time location-based solution that makes it very easy for the decision makers to be able to monitor any rapid change in conditions as they happen. With that, if you need to brief your operations staff in real time, this is all happening within that same common operating picture. And that then allows us to make better informed decisions as we look to preserve lives as well as property as best as possible. All right. So you want to be able to quickly understand the potential impact from an incident. So with this system, where we have the ability to capture data offline, and that is very big in an emergency. Being able to capture data offline because, as I say, your utilities might go. And once you're able to get back online, all of that now just uploads to the cloud, to the system, without you having to manually write it on paper, losing that data as you transfer from paper to a digital system. It allows for that kind of thing. Being able to manage and deploy your limited resources that you do have. And as I say, monitor those rapid changing conditions. All right. Now, for information sharing, we're talking more about being able to communicate with the public and more so the media. Because as you know, hurricane hits, people are listening to their battery operated radios. What is happening? I don't have a visual picture. My phone battery is dead. I don't have contact with anybody, but with my battery operated radio and my candle, I'm able to hear what's happening. And the coming from the official reputable sources, in this case, with our governments in most cases, you are getting this real this truth or the source of truth from the right people to say, where are the roads closed? Where are the evacuation zones? Where are the nearest shelters, for instance? So being able to communicate that through the media, through public, and if your systems are up, if you're able to still send things online, whether it's through social media or through your ArcGIS, your own website, your own hub, being able to publish that data to your stakeholders is very important. And again, because we have this one system that becomes the source of truth, that allows everybody to be speaking from the same picture. Yeah. So let's see here. And lastly, collaboration. Most important, and I would say for me personally within the industry, having seen how collaboration really increased during Hurricane Melissa. I mean, it was a sad incident, but it did reap a reward, I would say, of seeing collaboration happening between our agencies in real time. Agencies sharing ArcGIS online information from one agency, putting them in an online group and adding other members from different agencies so that they could share data and also analyze together in the most part. Or EOC or EOC, Emergency Operations Center, was pretty good. Now, for recovery, quickly holding on time. I think we're doing all right. And perhaps in maybe 10. So recovery, it helps you to, you want to return to normalcy faster. You want to also be able to expedite funding. So you want to be able to start getting funding, whether it's from the diaspora in some cases, people wanting to contribute. You're definitely going to have agencies who want to come in, whether it's your NGOs that are coming in or, Good Samaritans that are coming in, to help for that recovery, seeing what would have happened. And we'd have seen a lot of that. So once you're able to, as I start, conduct that damage assessment more efficiently, understanding the impact, you're able to now deploy those resources to help the community recover. In terms of debris management, you want to be able, to be clear the streets. You're gonna have fallen trees. You're gonna have cars that may be areas that may be flooded. You may have signs that fly off. You may have roofs of houses that actually, are off, and being able to send out teams to say, hey, we need to get these areas cleaned up because if the road is blocked, you can't get to other areas. So debris management is very important. and that within this recovery phase. And then, I mean, ultimately, you want to be able to, monitor and manage your restoration status. Our utility company had a very excellent dashboard that it went all the way up to the Prime Minister, looking at, okay, we can see how, the lights come back on in the different areas. And the minister that was in charge of that portfolio was able to share, accurate information with information that was coming out of the dashboard. So creating these patterns of inventorying data, because it's very important how you keep your data inventory, whether it's for data from the field or data that legacy data that you may have, and then now displaying those results in a dashboard to extend to many other aspects of recovery, whether it's the power status as mentioned, whether it's the status of transportation, inspection of different areas, allowing everybody to operate from that common picture, as we call it. Now, we do know that organizations have challenges, not only with the frequency of the disasters, your costs go up. Also, there may be a team of maybe 2 people or a team of 1 person in some agencies that we've seen in the Caribbean. And your scope begins to expand. So you're like, how can 1 person provide all of this? And you become like this one GIS analyst providing data to a lot of people, and it's a lot of requests coming in. So we know that that expanding of what we call the mission scope happens a lot. Along with that, staff burnout within the industry, we've seen turnover happen, from agents to agency, the different heads change, the different teams below the heads change. So you'll be talking to somebody today and they're no longer at this agency, they've now moved to another agency, and that happens. And when that happens, the continuity of the projects that maybe the organization was working on, they just kind of fall flat when somebody leaves and somebody new comes in, because there is no proper data transfer. So being able to store your data within this system so that when somebody comes in, they can see what exists and get the flow running. That is one thing. And I would also say within the emergency management community, we do have special bundles that outside of just licensing, we are on board as your trusted partner to help you, whether it's to set up your ArcGIS system, whether it's to help you with the analysis side of it, or if it's just to provide training, which is also very important, along with the training that you already get with licensing. If it's to provide that organizational training, we also do that, or providing what we call more like advisory service based on experience. So there are solutions available based on the nature of the scope of your team, and also I would say maybe the budgets of your team. Now, outside of the organizational challenges, I would say there are technical challenges. Whether it's how data is being managed. A lot of organizations have very old data, and when they actually look and try to score the data, they have this data cleaning process, this data validation process that they probably have to start over. A lot of agencies are still using paper, and those paper processes can't scale. And even some of those digital processes, how do you scale Excel sheets? So how do you put this into a system that now can scale your operation much better? You may be getting, information from many different sources. How are you taking the insights that you need from those bits of information and applying them into the solutions that you are working with, so that you can, have that data ready? And, getting information into and out of the field, again, ArcGIS does allow for that. So again here, I'm going to pause. I'm going to switch screens to show a little bit of what we call ArcGIS solutions. And then after I do that, we are pretty much look to close and move to our question and answer. So we're doing all right on time. So this, when you go into ArcGIS, there is an app called ArcGIS Solutions, which is a ready-made collection of geospatial solutions. So a lot of times, in conversations with agencies, they don't know maybe where to start, and the GIS person may be new and they, don't know where to start. However, from experience, and different use cases and patterns of how deployments happen around the region, around the world, I should say. There are certain patterns that remain trusted and true. So whether it's a flood impact analysis, a lot of people are going to be doing that. Whether it's going to be emergency shelter management, a lot of people are doing that. And again, there are templates that are already ready and just waiting for your good base data to be able to just isn't eventually just start spitting out your dashboard and spitting out your map products, how you want to use them. All right, so I'm going to switch screen and do a quick demonstration of that. And then we look to move into our Q&A shortly after that. Just in the chat, let me know. So I see some questions. All right, start some conversation. So let me stop sharing. And while trying to read the chat, good afternoon. A major challenge for us is having baseline data for data analysis, such as storm surge. Okay. So is that a case of how the data is being collected? Is that a case of that? In terms of that baseline data, what data do you already possess, and have you been able to, look within the ArcGIS portfolio to see what data is already available? From Mr. Allen, I love the dashboards. I can see how the presentation of spatial information will be beneficial to our DEOs here in Barbados. Okay, I'm very happy to hear that you love the dashboards, and for sure, let us connect, Mr. Allen, and look at how we can connect with the DEOs for sure, and share more information. We're always happy to do presentations in that regard. All right, so let me. Oh, all right. Let me move all right, perfect. So let me share the screen now. Just in the chat, just let me know if everything is all right so far, continue so far, while I now share my screen. All right. So confirming everybody seeing the screen that I have up before I proceed, because I know technical things happen. Yes, all right. All right, thanks, Terry. Appreciate that. So, as mentioned, for users that have ArcGIS licenses, when you log into your ArcGIS portal, you have the ability. Oh, let me start from here. Right. So when you log into your ArcGIS portal, it may look something like this, or it will look based on how you've created your portal. But what I want to get into is that in your list of applications, what I'm pointing here to is what we call ArcGIS solutions. And again, these are industry-specific mapping configurations of ArcGIS that allows you to, pretty much take a solution and deploy it if you need to. So we have 147 solutions that span across all these agencies. And I want to point out, let us say that I don't work in a disaster management agency, but I work at, let me just say, a utility company. Generally, corporations have what we call emergency operations teams. They could also be using ArcGIS as a part of how they deploy the emergency operations within their organization based on the data that they have. So it's a use case or a solution to a problem, and not so just geared to a sector within itself, if that is clear. So I want to highlight right here, I'm going to the public safety industry, and we're talking emergency management. But again, these are open to. One of my favorite ones, I would say, is the emergency shelter management solution. So when you open the solution, it shows you, once you have your data, whether it's pulling in your spreadsheets, whether you already have ArcGIS, you can bring the data that you would have already have within the system, whether it's QGIS, wherever you're importing your data from. Once you begin to put that data within the templates itself, it will start to spit out those ready-made experiences that have already been built. Whether it is to build a hub page, whether it is, even surveys are available there. So, you can look at the surveys there and look to even probably edit them to suit your needs. But you're not starting from scratch. It gives you an idea. And it creates, resource planning. So these are templates that are already available within the solutions that you may have. All right. And based on this license, I can't deploy this solution. But if I'd be happy to meet with the team, have one of my solution engineers on that call, and show how you can deploy that solution within your agency. All right. So let me just quickly show you Esri's.
Hello, today we would like to introduce you to the Emergency Shelter Management Solution. It helps emergency management agencies efficiently manage shelter operations during emergencies. Many shelter operators either track occupancy in spreadsheets or not at all, meaning emergency managers are left without up-to-date information. Without spatial awareness of guest and facility locations, emergency managers are lacking critical input for determining which shelters to open and how to appropriately plan resources and staffing. Visualizing shelter locations combined with up-to-date shelter occupancy enables emergency managers to effectively assess capacity and determine whether to open or close facilities. We will begin the demonstration discussing shelter management and occupancy reporting. I'll start by assuming the role of operations staff at an emergency management agency who will add and update shelter information. Creating an inventory of shelters is the first step in preparedness, so you can quickly open shelters following an incident. Updating the status of shelters to open will help coordinate the next activities of occupancy reporting and guest registration. Next, I will assume the role of shelter staff who will provide occupancy reports for my shelter. Using the Shelter Staff Resources site, I can quickly open a form to report occupancy counts for people, pets, and large animals at my shelter. Regularly updating shelter occupancy information is essential for maintaining accurate visibility into current capacity and needs. To ensure that shelter capacity meets current demand, emergency operations centers typically expect shelter occupancy information to be reported twice each day. Operations staff can see when the last occupancy report was for each open shelter and quickly link it to the form to provide the latest count update. As command staff, I can use up-to-date information provided in the shelter status dashboard to help determine if more shelters are needed to be opened, closed, or consolidated. Reliable up-to-date counts support effective decision-making, resource coordination, and the continued delivery of safe, necessary services during response operations.
In addition to occupancy counts, many organizations are interested in managing guest registrations to help with resource planning and reunification efforts. As shelter staff, if my shelter is managing individual guest registrations, I can use the Registration Management app to check in, look up, and check out guests at my shelter. As guests enter the shelter, I can check them and their group members in while capturing basic demographic information. I can also search for guests that have registered. This can be useful for reunification and managing guest checkout efforts. As an incident ends, I may need to consolidate shelters or understand the spatial distribution of my shelter guests. A map of guest addresses can help in that decision-making process. Lastly, I will assume the role of a resource planner for my shelter. Shelter resource planning depends on the timely visibility into when and how many people are entering my shelter. Tracking guest registration trends using the resource planning dashboard allows planners to quickly spot surges in demand, anticipate food needs, and adjust supply and distribution plans so shelters remain sufficiently stocked as conditions change. Thank you for your time learning about the Emergency Shelter Management Solution, which can help you efficiently manage shelter operations during emergencies.
Okay, perfect. So Very well. Very well. Right. So that's just the emergency management solutions. As mentioned, there are different solutions here that are already built. Emergency management operations as a solutions, debris management, flood impact analysis. And what I'd like to just quickly show you is that it also helps to identify, who are the different roles you may have within the organization and the suggested user type or the minimum user type that they should have. So it gives you an idea in terms of planning, and it is updated pretty well. I said it is updated maybe maybe twice a year. Maybe once a year, once or twice a year. With in terms of adding new things based on how the solution is used, and pretty much learning based on how the solution is used and making improvements there. So with that said, let me close the industry management solution and get back to the slides where I will wrap. Thank you for staying with me. Oops, wrong thing. My bad. Here we go. Right. So in moving to close up, what we want to one of the things I want to bring across is that the system. Oops. Oh, I didn't do. Yeah, there we go. The system supports workflows and missions of emergency management agencies, whether it's conducting an impact analysis, whether it's doing your hazard mitigation planning, operationalizing them, whether if it's during the response phase, enhancing your situational awareness, or if it's expediting the damage assessment, in order to get the recovery funding that you may need. ArcGIS does help in all those ways that we've spoken about, and the system is flexible, it's adaptable, and it definitely will help to kind of meet your challenges and missions that you have. And there's no need to look for technology for the mission, look for new technology for the mission, as we would say. So with that said, I just want to share two major events that are coming up. One is the Esri User Conference, as many of you may know, is coming up. It happens every July. It's the world's largest GIS conference. Registration is still open, and it's the largest geospatial conference there is. A lot of people from the community and how things are done. There are disaster management experts and workshops that are available that you can participate in. So that is July 13th to 17th. And if you need any information on that, also feel free to reach out to me. And secondly, we are doing the inaugural Spatial ArcGIS User Conference in Kingston, Jamaica. That is September 29th to 30th, 2026, where now users from around the region will be there. You can talk to them, share your experiences, because one of the most important things within this community is sharing experiences with each other, because we are all from one region. And similarly, we are paired with LATAM. So if you know people from within the Latin American region, we also have similar experiences based on the experience. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I will go back to the chat to see if there are any additional questions. Feel free to share any more questions that you may have there. But here is my contact information, and I'm the public safety and emergency management sector lead. So if you're within this sector, I'm definitely a good resource to work with, and I'd be happy to listen to the challenges that you have and ensure that you have the right solution. All right. And also to mention that, in terms of the right solution, as I said, we know that the needs of the organization changes. So as mentioned, we have multi-year what we call bundles that allow for that kind of flexibility. So, depending on the needs of the organization and depending on the budget of the organization, I'm sure we can find a right fit solution for you. All right, so the last question I'm seeing here is the charity, which is public safety oriented, will be embarking on training with ArcGIS this year. Any advice for us how to begin? Yeah, for sure. I would say that once you're utilizing ArcGIS, it means that you have access to the self-paced academy. So I would say look at the Esri Academy. You can do a quick search online as well to see the Esri Academy. They have massive open online courses available and that you can register for, open, free, it's free to register. And then you also have classes that are more on demand based on either the products that you're using. So if you're using ArcGIS Pro, if you're using ArcGIS All Source, ArcGIS Velocity, it has different product related trainings separate from trainings about your workflows. So now it's like, okay, how do you use survey 1, 2 in the field? So capturing field work, different workflows and different topics. So I would say just check out the Esri Academy. I think that's a great place to start. And if you have any questions again, feel free to reach out to me on any of the bits of contact information here. All right, so I'm seeing two things in the Q&A. All right, so let me start with the short one. Will there be any meeting further updates regarding the spatial conference soon? Yeah, definitely. I know the team are working on the web page for that. So I anticipate that will be landing this month. So once that web page is there, it should have much more details. And for organizations that have been reaching out to ask us, how can they sponsor the event? It should have some sponsorship packages there for organizations that have expressed interest in doing that. So that's how I answer that. All right. From Mr. Salmon, so with respect to public access of GIS disaster risk dashboard that display critical information to locations, how accessible is this type of tool to the general public? For example, what platforms or interfaces are typically used to host and distribute such dashboards, and what barriers, if any, might prevent? Additionally, given the general procedure, how can this be addressed? Right. Quite a lengthy question. So let me tackle it. I guess, question by question. So in terms of this public access and the dashboard, so as licensed user of ArcGIS, you have the ability to share data on different levels. So if data is confidential within your organization, let us say even within your department, you have the ability to share just within your department or keep data to yourself, share within your organization, or if you want to share within the public. So we see a lot of governments around the world, they utilize what we call ArcGIS Hub, which creates a website, in for better words, but a hub site with like different dashboards that the public can interact with, and also allowing them to even share information with the agencies through public applications. One of those public applications I can speak about is the one that we used during Hurricane Melissa, where users were able to take a picture in WhatsApp. So because we integrate with different systems, we're able to take a picture and share via WhatsApp as well as their location. And we were able to map that within our emergency operations center. So they become what we call citizen reporters. In terms of the dashboard, it's really who creates the dashboards and how they want to share them. Again, the source of truth is very important. So who are the authorities that have the accurate data is very important in terms of the type of data that you want to see in these dashboards. So in most cases, it's really on the agencies in terms of how they want to communicate. I will say a tool like ArcGIS Story Map is we found that very useful if you've ever seen it, where you're able to tell a story utilizing maps and engage the public in that way. It's very useful. And there's some public ones out there, so if you're interested, we can always connect and I can share a few of those with you. If might prevent members of the public from access during a disaster event, is it available offline? Is it available offline? So most of the stuff they publish online, it would be available offline, but maybe not to the public, I would say. Within your organization, if you have an enterprise, you can do it that way. In terms of limited exposure and familiarity with GIS, how can this be addressed? So the thing about it is that we understand that there's a lack of familiarity with GIS, but it's also important that when we talk to people that may not use GIS, non-GIS, let's call them non-GIS, non-GIS people, we have to be careful of how we bring across GIS, because GIS becomes the tool and the technology that we use. It's more about the ease of using different applications, because you realize that a lot of the ArcGIS applications are applications. how do you utilize, how do you publish data to the web so that they're just using their browser, but the underlying tool that was used to make that product was ArcGIS. So it's not so much to get them to say, okay, use ArcGIS or use GIS at all, but how the data is shared with them. It was built on GIS in that case. So if somebody sees a dashboard, they have the ability to read a dashboard. For them, it's not so much about, okay, how did the data get into this? And at the end of the day, for most of the decision makers in that sense, they just want to see, what is happening in real time in most cases so that they can make those decisions. And then for the public, how you share your data about like road closure and stuff like that, you can always utilize the tools of the, published on the website so that the teams can see that. All right, so I hope I was able to answer at least most of your questions, Mr. Sam. In reference to the local one, who is the contact person? Well, you can touch bases with me and I put you in contact. You could reach out to our marketing manager, so Sean Bennett. I can put you in contact with him or acting CEO currently, Mr. Rashawn Clark, for those of you that know him. He also has a lot of information. But again, you can always reach out to me first, and depending on if I can assist, then I will. And if I'm unable to, I definitely can connect you to the right person. All right. So with that said, I know we're 3 minutes above the hour. I want to thank all of the teams that joined. I'm hoping to speak with many of you, and if you don't mind, if I have the ability to reach out via the contact list, I could be reaching out to some of the agencies just to understand some of the challenges that you're facing, at least to see if there's a solution that may be already available to you, or how we can assist with ensuring that your disaster season isn't a very challenging one, I would say. So with that said, thanking everyone for joining today, and I hope to see you at the end of the month, because webinars are actually supposed to be the last Wednesday of each month. However, last week Wednesday I did have a challenge, so I'm here on the first Wednesday, but our webinars are actually the last Wednesdays of each month. So you can card that in the calendar, and we'll ask our marketing team to send out more information about it. So thanks for the time, everyone, and yeah, let's connect. All right, see you soon. Bye, everyone.